This represents 3 hours of work, but I don't like it. I can't figure out what's wrong, so what do? I'm an artist with 30 years oil painting experience, and if I've learned anything, is that you cannot keep working a painting that's failing. Your best bet is to just take it all off and start over. Now, lucky for me, I have an underpainting still intact, and I do like the composition. That's not the problem. I think the problem was I overworked it, and I was just trying this and that, and it was not working. So I bit the bullet, as you can see, and I wiped it all off, and we're going to start over. Watch and see how this one develops. First of all, I'm going to clean up the palette. Okay, you can see that I'm probably just still a little bit frazzled over this. And I'm going to clean up the palette as a way to reset my artist's focus. Palettes need to be organized. It's something that a lot of new artists don't do. There's nothing good about a bunch of built-up paint everywhere on your palette. Let's start over again. We're going to start with the eye. Actually, it only comes to like here. Okay, and then this comes out quite a bit more. You can see that I just outlined the birds, and now I'm including the heart. I want to make sure that I have that correctly placed. I think that's one of the areas I went wrong during my first attempt. And now we're back to the eyes, and I'm using my scrape out tool to outline the outer rim of each eye. Notice that I'm placing the highlight in one eye and then immediately into the other eye. I am doing this to try to achieve unity between the two birds. I like how this is already showing variety, because I already have an underpainting down. I really do. This is an underpainting. Now we're back to the hard part. All right, I started by putting the purplish color in the wings, but then I decided, why don't I just blend with the brush all around the lines that I created as a way to establish a base for some shadows. The background color is quite dark. However, I am going to use a technique to blend it with white. Now, it's a little bit on the dangerous side to do that because if you don't know how to really blend color, you're going to end up getting a chalky finish to the paint when you do this technique. But I do know how to blend. Once I start putting the white on, there you see I'm starting to put the white on, and you can see some chalkiness coming through, but I'll keep blending, and it's a matter of how much pressure and how little pressure you put on the brush as you're doing this technique. So yes, it is a combination of lots of pressure and then a little bit of pressure, and then adding more white. Again, lots of pressure, little bit of pressure. That's the whole technique. And I do it because I like the brushwork that it achieves. There's like heavy brushwork in the background, and I just love that. I love brushwork. I think I'm going to take some of this off. There's just a little too much buildup on there. And lighten it up a little bit. So what happened here is it dried a little darker than I wanted to, and that's because there was too much paint underneath. Sometimes doing this technique, you have to make sure that the darker color is not thickly built up. Otherwise, it will dry dark. And it was already drying dark, even being on just for a very few minutes. Here you see that I have switched brushes. I went from a number 5 to a number 10 brush, and that is because I really want to limit how many brush strokes I do on this. That is another reason why this technique is a little on the tricky side, because the more brushwork you do, the more chances of taking off that lighter color over the dark, and then the dark seeping through, and you ruin the technique. And now I'm using my blender brush, and I'm telling you, I am using such a very light touch. And now we're putting in some shade around that bird's belly. because the light would no longer be hitting it there. And here I decide to darken the whole bird. Let's see what happens afterwards. I'm going to try something different. I'm going to scrape off the color that I applied, and I'm taking the brush that I used for the background, and I didn't wipe it off. I'm just using whatever's on that brush to neutralize the color in a way that it brings in some of the background tones. And now I'm back to the regular brush that I'm using to develop the birds with. Here I'm applying the purplish tones that are there on every cardinal's, the male cardinal anyways, their back. And it's just a right amount to break up that intense red. God knows what he's doing. Although it looks like I'm finishing up the cardinal, I am not happy with the amount of red and the intensity of the red. So here you see me putting more red down, but I'm just still trying to figure out what is the best way to make him work with the entire painting and not be the one screaming, "Look at me." Now I'm having an easier time developing the female cardinal, which was a surprise to me. But for some reason, my brushwork was easier to achieve and look more like a genuine feather structure on a bird. Here you see me dragging some of the background color in. That is to make it fade away or become a lost edge. Although it's obvious by her coloring, I do like to put a little bit of an eyelash line on all the female birds when I do this type of commission. Here I'm just cleaning up some edges around their beaks and the heart. Work our way down. We'll start with this in here. So I'm starting to develop the branch that the birds are alit on. And I start with warmer colors, but then taking a closer look at the colors of the birds opposed to the color of the background, I'm second guessing that, and you will see what I do. So what did I do? I'm actually taking the same green of the background and painting it into the branch. And if you notice, you'll see that at times I'm blending the colors and at other times I'm not. I just can't tell you how I determine this. It's just from years of practice. But one thing that's very important to me is that brushwork always describes what I'm painting. And this is what I call calligraphy for oil painting. Time to get the birdie feet in. All right, so now you see me putting in suggestions of little, I don't know, little tiny baby branches coming off of the bigger branch. What odds would you give me that they don't stay in the painting? I just love the brushwork that's involved with this female cardinal. It is just coming together so easily. Another lost edge attempt, but this time on both of their bellies. And here I am removing the suggestion of little twigs coming from the main branch. Here's another attempt to put in some of the background color, and I'm very softly suggesting that color. I'm doing that as a way for the cardinal to blend in. You know, cardinals are pretty intense birds with their coloring, and I just don't want him to stick out more than any other part of the painting. So that's why I try to subdue him like this. I don't really like how the names are written on inside the heart. So you see I'm taking them out. I am going to be working on this for quite a bit of time. You know, if it doesn't look right, it has to blend in really well. It can't stick out too much. You just want it to be part of the overall composition of the painting. So, in the interest of time, I'm not going to show you the struggle, but believe me, there was a struggle. You'll notice that the male cardinal has been softened even more, and that's to indicate that Al has gone to heaven.